Tales of Herding Gods Episode 41. Interpreting the original classic, savoring the fates of its characters.
Hello everyone.
I'm the content creator Feitian Shinhong from the Gueman section. Fellow Taoists who like Tale of Herding Gods, please give this a thumbs up and show your support. Picking up where we left off, over 10 young lords wanted to teach a lesson to Qin Mu, the outcast from the Great Ruins. But they were tricked by Qin Mu into Wei Yong's residence. Although they were told they couldn't kill in the capital city, giving someone a good beating was still acceptable. So, Qin Mu made the first move. He launched a sneak attack with techniques that specifically target the soul, thunderclap snap of the Pipa hand, and sunlight illumines the young soul in the sky. As soon as these two moves were unleashed, this group of young lords, before they could even react, were all knocked to the ground. That's right, there wasn't much of a fight. If you could call it that, it was under the influence of the demonic music that each young lord began to dance wildly. Laughing hysterically, they started singing and dancing in the courtyard. After a moment, only Wei Yong was left in the small courtyard, still singing and dancing. Qin Mu withdrew his technique.
The demonic melody faded.
Only then did Wei Yong snap out of it. He hastily looked around, his face changing drastically. "Brother Qin," he asked, "what happened?" Qin Mu smiled and said, "I borrowed your precious land to teach a lesson to a few foolish senior brothers. Your place is secluded, so no one would stop me from beating them." Wei Yong was horrified. He rushed to look at his courtyard walls. He saw the young lords hanging on the wall, their heads embedded in it, with no strength to move. Wei Yong's face turned ashen. "Brother, you're in big trouble," he exclaimed. "These young lords who could enter the Imperial College, which one of them isn't from a great and powerful clan? And now you've beaten them up. How can this be?" Qin Mu retorted, "If I don't beat them, should I wait for them to beat me? What's done is done. What else can be done?" Wei Yong stomped his feet repeatedly and said, "You borrowed my courtyard to beat them. I'm from the Wei family. They won't dare to do anything to me. But you're definitely going to be in for it. What are we going to do?"
Qin Mu walked outside.
He smiled and said, "They came to teach me a lesson, so they should be prepared to be taught a lesson by me." He walked out of the courtyard and strode forward. One of the young lords woke up. He said weakly, "Outcast, how dare you ambush us? Once we recover, you're a dead man." Qin Mu's face turned cold. "If you dare mention the word outcast again," he warned, "I'll beat you every time I see you." That young lord, being stubborn, said again, "Outcast."
Qin Mu pulled this young lord out of the wall.
He dragged him to the front of his own residence, used him as a large brush, and started writing on the wall with the blood from his head. Qin Mu wrote 2 vertical lines of characters. Then he took this young lord, whose head and face were covered in blood, and planted him in the ground. This young lord was inserted into the ground, with only his head sticking out. He was so furious and anxious that he fainted.
The other young lord woke up one after another.
They pulled their heads out of the wall, each with a look of shame on their face. They had been careless for a moment and were ambushed by Qin Mu. This attack didn't target their physical bodies, but their souls. It was incredibly hard to defend against. Wei Yong quickly explained, "Senior brothers, I am from the Duke's mansion, the Wei family. I have nothing to do with this." The dozen or so young lords looked at each other in dismay. One young lord sighed, "We've messed up this time. Ambushed by the new kid.
We've lost all face. Brother from the Wei family, don't spread this matter around.
Let us save some face." Wei Yong breathed a sigh of relief. "Rest assured," he said. "I've always been tight-lipped.
He will never speak of this to outsider."
Senior brothers, what are your plans? Fellow Taoists, please remember the words of this fatty, Wei Yong. You will find out later what he means by tight-lipped. The young lords were silent. One of them declared, "Of course, we're going to get our reputation back. This was a huge embarrassment. We'll recover and get our face back tomorrow. He caught us by surprise this time. He caught us off guard. Tomorrow we'll show him." The young lords passed by Qin Mu's courtyard. They saw 2 rows of blood-dripping words written on the wall, sweeping through the capital without an equal, and kicking the 800 scholars of the Imperial College. On the door were also written 4 characters, unmatched and invincible. And on the ground in front of the door, there was still a person planted there. Their faces turned livid. They went forward and pulled the person out of the ground. One said, "Leave these words for now. We'll use them to humiliate him tomorrow." Meanwhile, Qin Mu returned to the Tingu Pavilion to continue seeing patients. He was already gaining some fame in the capital as the young divine doctor who specializes in complex gynecological diseases. Some men also came, attracted by his reputation. Qin Mu didn't turn anyone away, treating them all. However, there were cases Qin Mu couldn't cure. For example, several soldiers who had rushed from the border. The 5 men they carried seemed alive, but were actually already dead. The patients who were brought over had been afflicted by the shamanistic poison of the barbarian enemy nation. The shamanistic poison targets the soul. The border is currently at war with the barbarian enemy nation. And in the next arc, the Golden Lulon Kingdom, this is the place where Qin Mu will go for his training. Qin Mu said, "Their souls are already gone. I can't save them. You should go back."
The général criait out in grief.
He and his soldiers carried the 5 men away. Qin Mu gave them a prescription, saying it was for pure young refined worm eggs. This can counter the attacks of the soul worms in the shamanistic poison, he explained. If anyone else is afflicted by this poison, this prescription can save their lives. The general was both shocked and overjoyed. He suddenly knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily several times. Qin Mu quickly helped him up. "There's no need for this." The general wiped away his tears and turned to leave. For Qin Mu, it was just writing a prescription. But for that general, if it was effective, it could save the lives of many of his comrades. Qin Mu withdrew his gaze and sat down to continue seeing patients. Qin Mu had just treated a few more people when suddenly an official sedan chair entered the Tingu Pavilion. An elderly man in official robes stepped out of the chair. This person was a high-ranking second-grade official in the court, Lord Yen Jigue. He asked the young divine doctor to go and save someone. After a moment's hesitation, Qin Mu went with him. They traveled all the way to the imperial city. On the way, Qin Mu said, "Lord Yen, the patient in this household must be someone of great importance." Lord Yen stroked his beard and smiled. "If it wasn't for someone of great importance, I wouldn't have come personally to invite the divine doctor. Young Lord Qin, do you know who is responsible for the emperor not pursuing the matter of you being an outcast?" Qin Mu was taken aback and said, "I would like to hear the details." Lord Yen smiled faintly. "At that time, I told the emperor that you were the divine doctor who could cure that person. That is why the emperor did not pursue you, an outcast, for managing to get past the great ruins and enter the Eternal Peace Empire. If not for my words, do you think you could have become an Imperial College scholar? An Imperial College scholar holds at least an 8th grade official rank. How could it be casually given to a god's outcast who infiltrated our Eternal Peace Empire from the great ruins? This is a grave offense." Qin Mu's eyes flickered. He said, "If I can't cure that person, my head."
Lorian logt, wonte bisaved. Qin Mu's face d'arken d'after the official landed.
Lord Yen led the way in front. He said, "That man came for an opportunity. You must not be presumptuous. Understand?" Qin Mu said, "It concerns my life and Lord Yan's future. I will naturally not be presumptuous." Lord Yen smiled slightly. "It's good that you know. My grandson is also in the Imperial College. He was selected 2 years before you. If you cure that person, I can have my grandson look out for you. That grandson of mine is also exceptionally talented, selected on pure merit." Qin Mu had a strange expression. He wondered if Lord Yan's grandson was among the scholars he had beaten. Haha, now that it's been mentioned, Hong Mao highly suspects he really was. The one who was badly beaten by Qin Mu and was still writing on the wall with his swollen face is named Yen Qinghe. As expected, he should be Lord Yan's grandson. Lord Yen led him to a deep palace courtyard. In a certain grand hall, there were 20 to 30 people, mostly palace maids and eunuchs. There were also a few imperial physicians waiting outside the royal bed, which was separated by a screen with a person lying inside. Lord Yen coughed and whispered, "A capital offense." Qin Mu's vital energy erupted. He held the drop of blood in mid-air and looked at it intently. At the same time he let out a low shout, "Divine Heaven's Eye open."
Den another shoot, clear Heaven's Eye open.
However, Qin Mu felt his vital energy was somewhat insufficient. making it hard to continue. He turned to Lord Yen to borrow vital energy. Lord Yen stepped forward, and vital energy surged into his body.
Divine light shone from Qin Mu's eyes.
The two beams of divine light shot out, extending over a foot. Suddenly, Qin Mu lifted the screen. The divine light in his eyes intensified, shining upon the Empress Dowager on the bed. The Empress Dowager had not expected at all that Qin Mu would be so audacious and reckless, daring to lift her screen. Her eyes immediately turned to him, her gaze like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, imposing without anger. Qin Mu met her gaze. After the divine light in his eyes dissipated, he said, "I have already diagnosed the Empress's condition. The Empress has been poisoned." The Empress Dowager lay on her sickbed, closed her eyes and said, "My body grows weaker by the day. Some of the physicians from the Imperial Medical Academy say it's an illness, some say it's poison. There's no conclusion. How are you certain that I am poisoned?" Qin Mu said, "The poison Her Majesty is suffering from is called 1,000 jigsaw poison. This poison is made from 1,000 interlocking poisons, refined into a strange poison. Its toxicity is ever-changing, and there is almost no cure. Any single antidote will cause the poison to change in another way, rendering the antidote useless. The more it is treated, the deeper the poison gets, and the more severe the torture. Her Majesty has been poisoned for a long time. Fortunately, Her Majesty's cultivation is profound, and some imperial physicians did not try to treat Her Majesty, but used spiritual elixirs to prolong Her Majesty's life. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable." The physicians from the Imperial Medical Academy were all greatly shaken. They exchanged glances, saying nothing. The Empress Dowager asked the physicians, "Does such a poison exist?" Physician Yu bowed and said, replying to the Empress, "Such a poison exists. It is said this poison was created by the jade-faced Poison King, but no one has ever seen it. Therefore, Empress Dowager, do you have any explanation?" The several physicians looked ashamed, lowering their heads in silence. The Empress Dowager caught her breath, her gaze falling on Qin Mu.
Little divine doctor, and you?
Qin Mu smiled, "I have a way to cure it. However, I need to know what medicines have been taken since the Empress was poisoned, and what the prescriptions were. As soon as possible. Also, I need 1,023 palace maids. And prepare brushes, ink, and 1,023 signs." The Empress Dowager waved her hand and said weakly, "Go and get it done quickly." Qin Mu's process of detoxifying the poison was rather complex. It required a group of palace maids holding numbered signs to arrange themselves into a formation. Then, based on the prescription, they changed formation and position. To put it simply, these 1,000+ palace maids formed a giant complex human abacus, with the palace maids as the beads. This allowed him to calculate which stage the jigsaw poison had reached in the Empress Dowager's body. By the next morning, Qin Mu finally finished calculating all the prescriptions. The palace maids, who had held the signs and stood all night, were also exhausted. Qin Mu looked at the final positions of these palace maids, the signs in their hands, and the final formation formed by the poison. He pondered for a long time, then closed his eyes. After another long while, Qin Mu opened his eyes and picked up a brush to write the prescription. The physicians were stunned by Qin Mu's methods, utterly dumbfounded. But even more, they were filled with the utmost admiration, praising him endlessly. This little divine doctor is truly divine. Next was gathering herbs and refining the elixir. Qin Mu's technique of refining an elixir from afar completely won over the experienced old physicians. Finally, Qin Mu also requested 1,023 three-legged blind-eyed toads, placing them in the hole. He said that when the Empress Dowager takes the elixir later, the main poison of the jigsaw poison will be replaced by the poison in the elixir. The other toxicities will then collapse, and the toxicity will become violent in an instant. The blind-eyed toad is a poison-eating creature, and these toads will take the opportunity to eat the poison from the Empress's body. Then the Empress Dowager can be cured. The Empress Dowager waved her hand, dismissing everyone. Qin Mu, the physicians, and Lord Yen withdrew outside the hall. Inside, the Empress Dowager took the elixir. Before she could feel any benefit, the medicine's effect erupted. A strange poison surged out from the elixir, instantly replacing the main poison of the jigsaw poison. The Empress Dowager let out a cry and spat out a mouthful of pitch-black blood. Immediately after, she felt the various poisons being replaced in all her limbs and bones, even in her hair and skin. The remaining 1022 strange poisons erupted at once, clashing and colliding, making her feel as if her insides were being torn apart. The pain was excruciating. Just as these powerful poisons erupted, a stream of medicinal power rushed out from the elixir she had taken, instantly coursing through her entire body and penetrating deep into her divine treasures. The medicinal power was fierce, forcing all the vital energy out of her body, even the vital energy in the divine treasures.
A loud rumble came from inside the hall.
The Empress Dowager's vital energy manifested physically, transforming into over 1,000 poisonous creatures surrounding her, roaming endlessly in the air. Poisonous scorpions, snakes, insects, lizards, turtles, and other venomous creatures, all formed from the combination of her vital energy. Croak, croak, croak.
The sound of frog came from the hall.
The three-legged blind-eyed toads suddenly croaked in unison, opened their mouths, and flicked out their long tongues, coiling around the poisonous creatures formed by the vital energy and poison, and swallowed them. In an instant, the hole was clear again. There was one blind-eyed toad that hadn't eaten any poison. It jumped onto the jade bed and faced the Empress Dowager, opening its mouth to suck. The Empress Dowager couldn't help but cough up a poisonous insect. It was the poisonous insect that Qin Mu had hidden in the elixir to replace the main poison. This blind-eyed toad ate the poisonous insect and hopped away from the bed. The Empress Dowager felt refreshed and clear-headed. Her body felt light as she rose from the bed, the illness that had plagued her for decades completely gone. Overjoyed, she called out, "Attendants!" The hall doors opened, and a group of palace maids and eunuchs hurried in, followed by Qin Mu, the physicians and Lord Yen. The Empress Dowager looked at Qin Mu and smiled, truly a divine doctor. Take these blind-eyed toads and release them into the clear wave pond. They have done me a great service.
Let them live there.
The eunuchs and palace maids quickly complied. Lord Yen was both shocked and delighted. He hurried outside saying, "This old servant will report this good news to His Majesty." The Empress Dowager walked outside and said with a smile, "Divine Doctor, there have been some misunderstandings here. Let's go outside to talk." Qin Mu agreed and followed her, with the physicians trailing behind. The Empress Dowager looked at the sunlight, shielding her eyes with her hand. She smiled, "It's been a long time since I've stepped out of this palace." The jigsaw poison was created by the jade-faced Poison King. Physician Su nodded and said, "The jade-faced Poison King is said to have disappeared over 200 years ago. This person was cruel and ruthless, poisoning countless experts. He offended too many people, but no one knew his true identity. It is said he was betrayed by his disciple, the little Poison King, who exposed his true identity. He could no longer find a place for himself, so he cut off his own face and left." Note the cut off his own face and left here. This is to say, the jade-faced Poison King actually disfigured himself. Just like Apothecary, he was also betrayed by his disciple. The Empress Dowager nodded and said, "I have heard of this matter as well. Speaking of which, I have also met that jade-faced Poison King. We met several times. I was once quite smitten with him." The physicians dared not speak. Was this something they were allowed to hear? The Empress Dowager said softly, "Who would have known that the Jade Gentleman, so famous back then, would turn out to be the notorious jade-faced Poison King? After his deeds were exposed by his disciple, it broke the hearts of countless young women. When the late emperor died, I was infatuated with this Jade Gentleman.
Oui, mais a few times.
When he was cornered and had nowhere to go, I told him I could protect him. A few other wretched women also wanted to protect him. In the end, those little vixens didn't win against me, but I didn't win against them either. He still left. Thinking back now, it's truly fate's cruel joke, to have me lie on my deathbed, unable to leave for decades due to a strange poison, and for it to be from the hands of a former lover." The physicians' foreheads were slick with cold sweat. They felt that having heard this secret, their heads would not be safe on their shoulders, and secretly regretted not leaving with Lord Yen earlier. A thought stirred in Qin Mu's mind. This jade-faced Poison King gave him a familiar feeling.
Could it be Grandpa Apothecary?
Haha, the dashing and romantic Jade Gentleman, who else could it be but Apothecary? You can understand it this way. The most handsome person in the disabled elderly village back then was the masked apothecary. Then Qin Mu asked, "Does the Empress Dowager know who poisoned her?" The Empress Dowager smiled. It wouldn't be the Jade Gentleman. Then it must be the little Poison King, Fu Yuanqing. I heard that Fu Yuanqing has taken refuge with the Imperial Preceptor. His poisoning of me was naturally at the Imperial Preceptor's behest. The Imperial Preceptor wants me dead, most likely because I disapprove of some of his actions, and he doesn't want me to stand in his way. The physicians' faces turned ashen. They suddenly knelt down, not daring to rise. The Empress Dowager smiled. The Imperial Preceptor dares to poison me. He is not afraid, so what are you afraid of?
Get up and speak.
Physician Chu and the others trembled, rose slightly, and fell silent like cicadas in winter, not daring to speak. The Empress Dowager looked at Qin Mu and suddenly said, "Is your master the Jade Gentleman? How is he?" Qin Mu thought to himself, the Jade Gentleman she speaks of should be Grandpa Apothecary. The method to cure the jigsaw poison was also told to me by him. To be so knowledgeable about it, it could only be the creator of the jigsaw poison. Thinking this, Qin Mu bowed and said, replying to the Empress Dowager, "He is well." The Empress Dowager let out a breath and said softly, "Did he ask you to come and save me? He still has me in his heart." Qin Mu blinked, feeling that she was overthinking things, but it was not appropriate to say it out loud. Haha. Since ancient times, many women have been spurned in love. Who would have thought that the Empress Dowager, bedridden and pining for her lover, would be saved because of the jigsaw poison? The Empress Dowager waved her hand and said, "You have been tired all night. Go back and rest early." Qin Mu agreed. The physicians were also relieved and left with him. Not long after they left, they heard the sound of "Make way, make way." Physician Chu quickly pulled Qin Mu to the side of the road. Then they saw Emperor Yanfeng approaching quickly, with his guards running behind him. Besides the emperor, there were also several men and women in magnificent clothes, presumably the empress, princes, and princesses. Cowherd. Suddenly, a surprised and delighted voice came from the crowd. The crisp voice sounded familiar. Qin Mu looked up and saw a beautiful young woman in the crowd. "Cowherd, it really is you," the young woman said, pleasantly surprised. "How did you get here?" Qin Mu was slightly taken aback. The young woman looked familiar, but he couldn't recognize her at the moment. She was being carried forward by the crowd, and as she walked, she waved and said, "Cowherd, where do you live?"
Yelel comme find you. The Imperial College.
Qin Mu waved back. Suddenly, a flash of light crossed his mind. That's it.
She's Ling Yuxiu.
Why does she look different from before? He thought to himself. Fortunately, her face is still chubby and hasn't changed. The physicians looked at him with strange expressions. The older physician you reminded him, "Little divine doctor, saying such things to a girl, especially a princess, will get you beheaded." Qin Mu retorted, "Then why do we great ruins people praise a girl's beauty by saying she is strong and fertile? Although Princess Yuxiu is not exactly strong, at least she's a little chubby. I think she should be able to give birth. Can such words be used to praise a girl?" The old physicians understood. They all looked at him as if he were a lost cause, thinking that sooner or later, he would be beaten to death for his words. Physician Chu said, "Little divine doctor, let's go back to the Imperial College. This whole night has been quite tiring for us old bones." After leaving the palace, Qin Mu and the physicians went their separate ways. He returned to Flower Alley, had breakfast at the Listening Rain Pavilion, said goodbye to Mother C and the other women, and returned to the Imperial College with his luggage and Hu Linger. Qin Mu arrived at the scholars' residence of the Imperial College and walked towards his own courtyard. From a distance, he saw several rows of scholars sitting in front of it. These scholars were sitting upright and still, each with a sword case by their side. A person guarding the courtyard said coldly, "Qin Mu, you should be awake by now, right?
Are you afraid of us?
If you're afraid, then come out and erase the words on your wall." Another scholar sneered, "We have patience. If you have the guts, then hide in your room for the rest of your life. I'd like to see how long you can hide."
Weren't you very arrogant yesterday?
You even had someone spread what happened, making it known to everyone in the Imperial College and causing us to lose a lot of face.
Why are you hiding inside now and not coming out?
Are you going to be a coward? The reason we're leaving your words up is to humiliate you, to make you feel ashamed. So that everyone in the Imperial College knows that you're just a commoner from the barren lands. We are the orthodox. Qin Mu walked forward, passing in front of everyone. He thought to himself, when did I ever spread this matter? The scholars stared at him blankly as he pushed open the door and walked in. They thought Qin Mu was hiding in his room, afraid to come out, but they didn't expect him to be returning from outside, making them waste half a day shouting at an empty house. Qin Mu went into the main room, put down his bag, and said to Linger, "Go and tidy up the room, make the bed. I'm going out for a bit." Hu Linger replied, "Young master, where are you going?" Without turning his head, Qin Mu said, "These people are too noisy. If I don't give them a beating, I won't be able to sleep." So while Hu Linger was tidying up the room, the scholars were once again swiftly beaten up by Qin Mu. When Hu Linger finished tidying up, she ran outside excitedly, but saw Qin Mu already walking in from outside, looking a little tired. Qin Mu yawned and said, "I'm tired. I'm going to sleep for a while."
Don't run around.
Hu Linger nodded, peeking her head out the door. She couldn't help but be startled. She saw that the road of the scholars' residence was littered with scattered scholars. Some were lying on their backs, some were hanging on the wall of the neighboring house, some were hanging upside down from a tree, and some were embedded in a wall in the distance. Hu Linger stuck out her tongue and ran over, rummaging through the unconscious scholars, taking their jade pendants, spirit pills, jade bracelets, hairpins and other items, and then brought them into the house.
Linger, what are you doing?
Qin Mu's sleepy voice came from inside the house. Hu Linger said righteously, "I'm plundering." Qin Mu's snoring came, he probably didn't hear. Hu Linger ran out again to move the scholars' sword cases. One of the scholars woke up and weakly raised his hand to grab his sword case. Hu Linger spat out a whirlwind, which lifted the sword case and smashed it against the scholar's head. The scholar's face was covered in blood, but he didn't pass out. Hu Linger smashed him a few more times, and the scholar finally fainted. Hu Linger breathed a sigh of relief and brought the sword case to the courtyard. The scholar secretly opened his eyes a crack, and seeing the fox walk away, he breathed a sigh of relief. He's awake again. Hu Linger caught him opening his eyes and screamed in surprise. Then the scholar saw a tornado pick up a small pile of decorative stones and prepare to smash them at him. He quickly fainted again, this time really scared unconscious. Hu Linger put down the stones and hopped and skipped away, plundering all the way, going further and further. At this time, a scholar in the distance woke up. Seeing the fox looting the treasures from the other scholars, he quickly struggled to crawl away. He was discovered by Hu Linger, who dragged him back. The scholar howled miserably all the way and then went silent, knocked unconscious by the fox. I have to say, Hu Linger is a bit cruel, her blows are a little too heavy. At the same time, in the Yenkong Kingdom's Imperial Preceptor's residence, the main hall is magnificent, but the place where the Yenkong Imperial Preceptor cultivates is very simple. There is only a large, empty hall with nothing else. Above the hall, a formation is suspended, and several of the Imperial Preceptor's disciples are there maintaining it, gathering starlight through a glazed, transparent cover that shines directly on the dome. The Yenkong Imperial Preceptor cultivates by gathering starlight, which is why his cultivation is extremely high. At this time, the Yenkong Imperial Preceptor's aura is shielded, and he is recuperating. Beside him is a man in black who is preparing a medicinal elixir. Suddenly, a red flying insect flew in from outside and landed by the ear of the man in black. The man's face was covered with toad-like pimples, making him look terrifying. He nodded repeatedly, as if he understood the red flying insect's words. The man in black is the little poison king mentioned by the Empress Dowager, named Fu Yuanqing. The little poison king said, "Imperial Preceptor, my junior brother has arrived. He has cured the jigsaw poison on the Empress Dowager." The Yenkong Imperial Preceptor asked doubtfully, "How do you know it was your junior brother who cured the jigsaw poison on the Empress Dowager?" Fu Yuanqing replied, "The jigsaw poison is my master's masterpiece. In the whole world, only he and I can cure this poison. The little insect told me that a young man came. It's obviously not my master, so it can only be his newly adopted disciple. I thought he was already dead. I didn't expect him to be still alive and even teach a little junior brother. Imperial Preceptor, now that the poison on the Empress Dowager is cured, should we use another kind of poison?" The Yenkong Imperial Preceptor shook his head, "There's no need." Fu Yuanqing was puzzled. The Yenkong Imperial Preceptor said, "Between the Empress Dowager and me, there is no personal grudge. Back then, for the sake of her son's empire, she opposed my reform. His Majesty was also hesitant about this, so I asked you to poison her, not to kill her, but just to prevent her from interfering in politics. Without the Empress Dowager's interference, His Majesty can focus on the reform. Now that my power is established, she can't stop me. Fu Yuanqing said with a smile, "You're concerned with the grand scheme of things, but I'm concerned with grudges. Your injuries are almost healed, so there's no use for me to stay here. I want to go for a walk."
Mai Junior broder ici.
As his senior brother, how can I not go and see him? The Yenkong Imperial Preceptor said, "You must be careful. The Empress Dowager will not do anything to me, but she can still punish you." Fu Yuanqing hesitated for a moment and said, "You were the one who asked me to poison her. Why would she kill me instead of you? How innocent the first am." The little poison King Fu Yuanqing's thinking is truly unique.
You sold out your master. Did you forget?
And the Empress Dowager and your master had something going on. The Empress Dowager is intelligent. She will surely know that the one who cured the poison is your junior brother. She knows you will definitely go to him, and she will definitely be waiting for you to take the bait. She will kill you to avenge herself, and also to avenge your master. Fu Yuanqing was in a big mess and had to give up this idea. When Qin Mu woke up, it was already afternoon. As soon as he stepped out of his room, he saw more than 10 sword cases standing in the courtyard, along with a pile of jade pendants, hairpins, jewelry, and other trinkets. As Qin Mu wondered, he heard a voice from outside the door. Someone smiled and said, "Is that you, Sister Fox Fairy?"
IVE comme tout redé Mai Young Mrs. Sings.
Then, Hu Linger's voice came through, "Not enough money. Your young lady's sword, hairpin, and bracelet are not ordinary items. This much money is not enough. What is Hu Linger up to?" The voice outside the door said carefully with a smile, "My young lady only gave me this bag of money. There really isn't any more.
Please, Sister Fox Fairy, do me favor.
This sword is a school issue. The hairpin and bracelet were given to her by her family's elders."
Fin, ouais un moment.
The door opened, and Qin Mu saw Hu Linger run in like a gust of wind, a bag of money floating behind her. This white fox was doing some magic. A whirlwind picked up a sword and several items, and she ran out excitedly to give them to the person outside the door. That person was extremely grateful, and after thanking her, the little white fox ran back. Only then did she notice Qin Mu. She was surprised and delighted. "Young master is awake. Young master, we have money." After saying that, she opened the door of the west room. On the floor were piled more than 20 money bags. Hu Linger opened them, and large coins flowed out, covering the floor. Qin Mu was speechless for a moment. Hu Linger said proudly, "Young master defeated those nobles. They were too ashamed to come and redeem their things themselves, so they had to send their servants. We fought a great battle." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "Linger, what you did was a bit unkind. I've already beaten them twice, and now you're robbing them. Asking for a ransom is a bit too much. After they pay the ransom, how can I have the face to beat them again?" Hu Linger stuck out her tongue, a little annoyed. "I've already beaten them once. The last time young master beat them, you didn't rob them. That was a big loss. Young master knows our great ruins rules better than anyone. You've said before, it's not called robbery if you get it with your skills." Qin Mu shook his head and said, "You robbed them and took their money. I'm afraid I'll go soft on them if I take their money. It'll be hard to fight them next time. We're almost out of money, but with this, we can last for a while. You're not allowed to rob anymore next time. Wait until the money runs out, then you can rob again. A slow trickle lasts longer." Hu Linger nodded repeatedly and said, "Young master is awake. I'll go make some food." "Make what?" "We have money now, let's go to the city and eat something good. Mountain delicacies and seafood, dragon liver and phoenix gall, you can choose whatever you like. One hot pot for each of us," he said excitedly, walking out. The fox followed, carrying a money bag. Many scholars saw Qin Mu and the fox pass by and quickly closed their doors, not daring to meet them. Qin Mu thought, "These scholars said that everyone in the Imperial College knew that I had beaten them. I definitely did not spread this matter myself. Then who could have leaked it?" Next to the scholar's residence is the prince's residence, where all the princes, princesses, and lords from royal families live. The imperial preceptor of Yenkong set a rule that the royal children do not need to be assessed. As long as they are 15 years old, they can enter the imperial college. However, since their status is noble, they naturally cannot live with ordinary scholars, so a separate courtyard was built for them. Wei Yong was laughing with several princes. You don't know, our scholars' residence is so lively. That Qin Mu beat up those scholars again. It was so miserable. Don't you dare say that I said this. Haha, even the old narrator Hong is about to die of laughter. Excuse me, big-mouthed Wei Yong, who was it that said he was always tight-lipped? A prince said in surprise, this person from the Great Ruins is actually so strong. Wei Yong boasted, he's all right. His skills are about the same as mine. It's just that his techniques are strange. I think those guys from the scholars' residence have been flying too high. Another prince laughed and said, the guys from the scholars' residence have always been arrogant. They think they got in with their own skills, so they've always looked down on us royal children. Now they've finally met their match. As Qin Mu walked out of Lion Alley, a young man walked towards him, covered in dust and carrying a huge bag. Although he was dusty, he was very handsome and had an air of killing about him, which gave people a sense of aggression. The two of them met. Qin Mu was affected by the young man's aggressive aura, and his body instinctively took a defensive and counter-attacking posture. Under the pull of their qi, the young man also had to stop. The young man bowed and said, "Are you a new junior brother?" Qin Mu returned the greeting and said, "I have just enrolled. Senior brother has returned from a long journey." The young man said, "I took advantage of the vacation to take a trip to the frontier.
My name is Shen Wanyan. Junior brother, if you need anything, juste comme tu me."
Qin Mu gave his name, and the two of them passed each other. It wasn't until their entangled qi had dissipated that they both let down their guard and walked away. This new junior brother is very strong, Shen Wanyun thought, turning his head to glance at Qin Mu descending the mountain. When Shen Wanyun arrived, the entire scholars' residence was in an uproar. Many scholars came out of their residences to greet him. Shen Wanyun said, "Everyone, we've only been apart for a little over a month. Why do you miss me so much? Why are you all injured? Junior sister Su, you were injured too? What happened?" This group of scholars exaggeratedly told the story of the Great Ruins outcast, Qin Mu. Shen Wanyun was slightly startled and thought to himself, so it was him. No wonder you guys are unwilling to accept defeat.
Why the need for a sneak attack?
Obviously, they wanted their senior brother to take action, but Shen Wanyun didn't seem to have that intention. However, there were still other powerful senior brothers and sisters coming. It was the girl in the mirror, Lu Qinghong, and the white-robed monk Yun Kun. These two had always wanted to be the senior sister and senior brother of the residence, so it was inevitable that they would take this opportunity to challenge Qin Mu. But what will be the outcome? Stay tuned for the next installment. For more exciting plot analysis, please continue to follow Feitian Xinhong. This has been an interpretation of the story and fate of the characters from Tale of Herding Gods by the original author, Zhai Zhu.
Roman B, don't go out after dark.
1 arrow, 3 connections, guaranteed safety. Please give us a like and subscribe, fellow Taoists. Let's continue our chat in the next episode.